Thanks for the introduction, Tom. And my talk is on integrated source protection plans and the work leading up to the current initiatives by the National Federation of Group Water Schemes. It's hard to believe that it's 16 years ago since the National Source Protection Pilot Project started on Milltown Lough catchment on the Churchill and Orem Group Water Scheme in County Monaghan. It's a cross-border catchment, and the project was led by the Centre for Freshwater Studies at Dundalk Institute of Technology under the steering group that included the former National Rural Water Monitoring Committee and several other stakeholders. It was established to evaluate potential for community-based and low-tech approaches to restoring drinking water quality at source, as opposed to relying solely on end-of-pipe treatment solutions. The final report was published in July 2011. An objective of this pilot was to formulate a strategy towards source protection for group water schemes generally. And in 2012, the National Federation of Group Water Schemes published its source protection strategy. This strategy had a two-phased approach. So the first being mapping and delineation of source catchments, and the second being the development of full source protection plans for schemes. So looking at the first phase of that in terms of the mapping and delineation of source catchments, these were desk-based studies on trying to understand the source and the catchment, gathering data, looking at sampling records, and delineating and mapping the catchment area for the group water scheme sources. Initial pilots for these preliminary zone of contribution studies was completed in 2010 across 6 group water schemes in Limerick and Cork in partnership with the GSI. We had other pilot projects during this period, namely the on-site wastewater treatment system. We had 2 phases of that. We had initial phase 1 on 4 group water schemes in County Louth, and then we had a wider rollout in phase 2 of 15 group water schemes around the country to further develop the delivery model of this project. And there's a lot of details up on our website around those projects that you'll find. Preliminary source protection reports, or ZOC reports, had started back in 2009. Funding provided a number of years later through the Rural Water Programme helped to capture the remaining privately sourced schemes. And now we have over 350 regulated schemes are now completed. And this work was coordinated by the National Federation of Group Water Schemes. So looking at the second phase that I've mentioned there, the development of full integrated source protection plans. The second phase of the strategy. Firstly, the source protection pilot project phase 2 was established in June 2018, and funding was provided under the multi-annual Rural Water Programme to develop and implement integrated source protection plans for 9 group water schemes across Monaghan, Roscommon and Westmeath, a mixture of groundwater and surface water schemes. These projects have been extremely effective to date and resulted in the development of 5 integrated source protection plans for 9 schemes. And we had 5 of the schemes in the 9 were put together and done under one plan due to the huge overlap of catchments in Roscommon. The karst features, vulnerability and overlap meant it made more sense to put them together for that particular batch. It was a collaborative approach with a range of stakeholders on this project, and we still have ongoing implementation of actions and initiatives going on. We had interim reports produced in 2019. We welcome the newly established standalone source protection measure under the multi-annual Rural Water Programme, which seen in the 2019 to 2021 cycle a 2.5 million allocation under that measure. Just in terms of the phase 2, it also resulted in the publication of 2 scientifically grounded documents that were published by the National Federation. Namely, we had the framework for drinking water source protection, and we also had a handbook of source protection and mitigation actions for farmers, as well as practical examples of targeting actions enabling group water schemes to lead and encourage wider participation efforts to protect their drinking water sources. The learnings from this pilot project have helped establish a process for integrated source protection planning. In 2021, we saw funding announcements under 2 projects. So the National Federation made funding submissions to both the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and also to the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine for additional projects, and I'll go into details on each of them. And a huge thanks again to both departments for the approval of this funding. Just to mention, firstly, in terms of both these projects, they're being coordinated by the National Federation. We have employed additional resources to assist with the coordination of both projects. A project team has been set up internally with a project manager, catchment scientist, and 2 source protection officers. We also have the additional supporting role from our development officers and our management team as well. So firstly, the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage funding towards the development of integrated source protection plans across 14 schemes in 2021. The National Federation has taken the leading role in coordinating this work of programme of works with funding and advisory supports from the department under the multi-annual rural water programme. This project was proposed in preparation for a larger rollout of programme of works in line with the 2022-2024 multi-annual programme, but also tying in with the 3rd cycle of the River Basin Management Plan, which runs from 22 to 27. To determine more accurate estimates of costs and also resources that's needed in this area as well, and looking at more practical experiences of possible remediation measures that might be involved. In terms of the 14 schemes that I've mentioned in this project, so in terms of selecting those schemes, we had to establish the breakdown of schemes, whether schemes likely fall within a protect or improved classification. The National Federation completed a preliminary classification exercise on a subset of group water schemes nationally, and this assessment relied significantly on water quality data and conclusions detailed in the phase 1 reports as well. Our in-house catchment scientist, Patrick McCabe, completed this detailed work. So a range of schemes have been selected from small protect catchments, small improve, large protect and large improve catchments. We also factored in schemes that are within or close to areas for action under the current cycle of the River Basin Management Plan. We have a mixture of groundwater and surface water schemes also selected. Good management structure in place on schemes is very important as well. The group schemes must take an active role in this, and their local knowledge and leadership is crucial. So in terms of these 14 schemes, just a few other points. Raw water monitoring programme is underway on those. It's very important to get a baseline of raw water quality, and it's also to be able to measure the success of otherwise of any actions and help identify problems. In terms of developing the plans, external consultants have been appointed following a procurement process. A technical training course was developed and delivered to over 30 experts in this field. And thanks to the GSI, Lawpro, Chagast and Donald Daly for their expertise in helping with this. The first step of the ISPP, in line with the framework document, involves data gathering, and catchment characterisation process will initially review all the data, and threshold levels for significant pollutants will help establish the primary objective of the ISPP, and that's confirming the classification status that I've mentioned earlier. So whether it's protection of the water quality or improvement and restoration of the water quality. Catchment visits are well advanced across the schemes in this project, which is a very important element for ground proofing evidence. The new pollution impact potential maps that are provided by the EPA are an essential component in identifying preferential flow pathways within critical source areas. And critical source areas are areas contribute to a disproportionately high amount of pollutants from diffuse sources compared to any other areas in that water body. We have progress meetings ongoing, although they're virtual at the moment. They're ongoing for each of the schemes in the project. We are expecting to receive draft integrated source protection plans over the next few weeks. And these draft plans are going to be reviewed by a peer review committee that's been set up, and also the group water schemes boards and management in line with the framework guidance document. So what do we want to achieve for the group water schemes? We want a practical and achievable plan with measures and actions that can be implemented. We want it in an easy to follow format for the group water scheme board and staff. It's a working document that can be reviewed as changes, hopefully positive ones, occur within the catchment. So in terms of the River Basin Management Plan and the 3rd cycle, it was great to be given the opportunity to propose new areas for action for the 3rd cycle of this plan, which will run from 2022 to 2027. Of course, we'd love to see all privately sourced group water scheme abstraction points and their associated catchments not currently within an area for action under the current plan to be included in the next cycle, but Unfortunately, it's not possible to have them all included. There are principles to be followed in proposing new areas for action. And we have, again, the basis for area for restoration and areas for protection. The National Federation has given a commitment to coordinate the completion of 69 integrated source protection plans and schemes, subject to funding under the current draft plan for the next cycle, in addition to the schemes that are already in the current cycle. So moving on to the second project that I'd mentioned earlier, we've received approval of funding of 500,000 has been made available from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine to implement mitigation actions to protect and improve drinking water quality from agricultural pressures on 7 schemes over a 2-year period across 2021 into 2022. And this project will demonstrate practical supports towards the protection of drinking water source quality, biodiversity enhancement, and also climate change. It also provides an opportunity to trial new and innovative approaches, which, if they're successful, could be adopted to help meet Water Framework Directive objectives. Given the review of the Common Agricultural Policy, this initiative provides an opportunity to identify measures that have a real impact on improving water quality, in keeping with the principles of the right measure in the right place and targeting actions to where they can deliver maximum benefits. 7 group water schemes are part of this project. 5 are also part of the 14 under the integrated source protection plans that I mentioned. Plus there's an additional 2 Aughnashalvey and Glaslough to Holland group water schemes in County Monaghan. Aughnashalvey already has its ISPP plan developed, and in Glaslough the sole focus in this area is pesticides and provide an alternative and controls to the use of pesticides. Pesticides is an emerging issue in drinking water, and it's been noted by many schemes across the country, including 3 of the large catchments that are involved in this project. Pesticides pose a significant difficulty to the vast majority of schemes that don't have treatment capacity to remove this contaminant. A catchment-based measure is desired to resolve this issue, and given the cost of installing and maintaining the necessary treatment processes. So other reasons for including these schemes, where those other particular issues, I've mentioned pesticides already, we also have phosphorus, sediment, microbial issues as well. Looking at varying sizes of catchments are also being selected, and the challenges that that brings with it as well. Schemes that maybe have already commenced implementing of basic source protection measures. And going back to my previous project, good management structures in place is crucial, because the schemes play such an important role in these projects. Looking at some examples of mitigation actions. So establishing appropriate mitigation actions at identified hotspots in the critical source areas, in addition to measures that are already required under the GAP regulations. Funding will only be made available for actions that go beyond legislative requirements. Alternative controls to pesticides and awareness in this whole area. Collaborative engagement programs with farmers and others. Our pilot projects to date have proven that biodiversity enhancement, for example, our Let It Be initiative, which you're going to hear about tomorrow, can act as a catalyst for the engagement with farmers. And we're working closely with the likes of ASAP advisors and LawPro in these areas. We'll also be looking at areas such as knowledge exchange programs for farmers. Appropriate fencing along water courses in critical source areas, another action. Putting smart buffers and hedgerow planting, and we'll be also looking at areas such as sediment traps and bank stabilisation. Building biodiversity and climate action into all of this work is very important. There's great opportunities for co-benefits in this area, as we have learned from the work in pilot projects, as I've mentioned already. In terms of the funding approach for this project, the schemes involved will apply to the National Federation directly, who are administering the funding. A terms and conditions document has been developed, and there'll be a 2-step approach for each funding application. First being the grant approval, and second being the grant payment. Detailed application forms are available for each step, and all works will be certified by the National Federation project team on completion. There are 2 categories being provided, 85% and 100%. 85% where actions require a once-off capital investment. Group schemes will be required to make a 15% financial contribution towards work in lieu of source protection benefits to their scheme. 100% where larger areas are required to provide adequate protection in critical source areas using the likes of smart buffers approach. And agreements will be in place with the relevant farmers and an ongoing annual payment to those farmers by the group water scheme. In terms of the whole area of results-based payment, this is something that we have been looking at developing a model for this in the group water scheme sector. So project status on this at present, I suppose the majority of the work to date so far has been looking at the mapping, identifying areas and working closely with the consultants that are appointed in the ISPs as well. Catchment walks and the process of engaging with farmers, which can take time, but the results to date have been very positive on the project with a great sign up from farmers in the areas visited to date. Tendering is underway for a number of initial fencing projects across a number of schemes, with planting and hedgerow among other actions to follow over the coming months. Finally, before my concluding slide, I wanted to go through a number of key points for group water schemes interested in getting started with developing integrated source protection plans for their scheme. So firstly, the availability of raw water quality data is an essential first step for the development of accurate and targeted actions. Where sources are found to be impacted, additional water sampling might be necessary. Group schemes should embark on a raw water monitoring programme for baseline parameters, in addition to parameters applicable to their source, as outlined in the framework document. Assistance and guidance from your local National Federation Development Officer is available. And the process of raw water sampling is already underway in a number of counties on a bundled basis, which is working really well. Understanding your catchment, going back to reviewing the original phase 1 desktop study report that was done for your scheme and gathering the additional data since then and trying to collate that. Looking at the pollution impact potential maps for your catchment, and the Federation can assist with creating these and getting these over to the scheme. Creating awareness and engaging with stakeholders in your community and catchment, whether it be newsletters, communicating with schools, householders, farmers. A lot of work can be done in that area. Look at opportunities for co-benefits and linking with biodiversity and climate action. And we've a lot of documents that can assist schemes with that as well. Group water scheme boards and staff are critical to this process, as I've mentioned throughout my presentation, and they need to be actively engaged throughout. Training is currently being developed in this area, and schemes are urged to attend this training when it's available. And finally, linking with quality assurance and water safety planning. Obviously source protection is the main and the first critical control point from source to tap in that process. And finally, in conclusion, people are working together in a strong community with a shared goal and a common purpose can make the impossible possible. So any small step in the area of source protection is a step in the right direction for privately sourced group water schemes. Thank you very much for listening.